What up, Bucs fans, NFL fans, and betting fans? This is Matt Matera from PewterReport.com, breaking down all of the best picks and props to bet on for week one of the NFL season for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is our newest show called Pewter Picks And Props, and we're starting it off with the week one. This is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Make sure you use that promo code Pewter, that's Pewter, and get a deposit bonus with Underdog and download the Underdog Fantasy app. We are going to break down my higher or lower picks for Underdog Fantasy. We'll also talk about the spread and the over-under in Bucs versus Vikings and get into a couple of my picks around the league as well. So if you're into fantasy drafts, betting, all that good stuff, you have come to the right place, especially if you want to talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So my picks for Underdog Fantasy, the higher and lower. I have Rashad White higher than 48.5 rushing yards, Mike Evans higher than 56.5 receiving yards. And because you have to pick one for each team, I also have KJ Osborne higher than 2.5 catches. I'm going to break all of that down right now, starting with the greatest offensive player in Buccaneers history, wide receiver Mike Evans. And I could not believe, let me reiterate this, I could not believe that Mike Evans, who's had 1,000 receiving yards in all 9 years of his NFL career, he's going into year 10 for this season, his over-under isn't even at 60 yards. It's not even at 60 yards. So as soon as I saw that, I immediately took higher with Mike Evans at 56.5 yards. And there's really a couple of reasons for this. One of them being Mike is rip-roaring and ready to go for this season. I know there's been a lot of discussion about the deadline for his contract extension, which starts or ends, I should say, on Saturday. He's done with it at this point. He's done talking about it. All he wants to do is play, and he's even more motivated because he wants to get paid after this offseason and extend his NFL record to 10 seasons with 1,000 receiving yards to begin his NFL career. So I like this over for a number of reasons with Mike, not even because of Mike, but because of offensive coordinator Dave Canales and what he's going to bring to a new look Bucs offense. There's a ton of intrigue and mystery when it comes to it. We know there's going to be a lot of play action and misdirection and a lot of eye candy, but it's also very friendly for the quarterback and the wide receiver. Mike himself has said that he's never been more open in an offense before than with this one with Dave Canales. So Mike may not be going as vertical down the field, but he's going to get open quick with a lot of slants and mesh routes. He's going to get that yards after the catch. But more importantly, they are specifically designing plays for Mike Evans to make sure he gets the football. If you don't believe me, hear from Dave Canales.
Now, when you design passes, you don't design passes to go to everybody. You design passes, truthfully, to go to Mike Evans, then Chris Godwin. And then everybody else, when they roll coverage, they double and do all that stuff, the ball goes to everybody else in suit, and then it ends up kind of spreading itself out naturally.
You heard it there first from Dave Canales. So an extra motivated Mike Evans, and going up against the Minnesota Vikings, they're a little bit thin at corner. They don't have Patrick Peterson anymore. He signed with the Steelers in free agency. So one of the guys that is moving into a starting role is another Evans. It's a Caleb Evans. He's going into his second year. He was drafted in the 4th or 5th round. This could be a matchup that the Bucs could really exploit. And a Caleb Evans, he's had a little bit of an injury history already. In one season, he unfortunately had 3 concussions, which obviously is very serious. So he is a little bit injury prone. And the knock on a Caleb Evans is that he's not the best tackler on the team and has a fair amount of missed tackles. So Mike Evans, not as well known as breaking tackles as, say, Chris Godwin is, but he's strong and he's physical, could probably muscle his way out of a couple of arm tackles. So that yards after the catch, Mike Evans, 56.5 yards. I really, really like this for Mike in a very motivated season. He wants to get 1,000 yards again, like I said. might as well start off in week 1 with a pretty high number. I think he gets over there. It's an excellent prop bet to make. Let's stick with the wide receivers and go to KJ Osborne, which is 2.5 receptions. That's what Underdog Fantasy has him, with the higher of 2.5. So this is an interesting one with KJ. Obviously, everybody loves Justin Jefferson. He's the best wide receiver in the league. For the Bucs' sake, I really hope that they put Carlton Davis on Justin Jefferson for a majority of the game, literally just shadow him everywhere. But there is a little bit of a change in the Vikings offense outside of the fact that running back Dalvin Cook isn't there anymore. They also don't have Adam Thielen. I believe he's with Carolina now. So there are going to be more targets going around to everybody else. Yes, they did draft Jordan Addison out of Pittsburgh and USC, and he's a pretty exciting talent. But he's also a rookie going into his first NFL game. So I think there will be a little bit of time for him to get his feet wet. Obviously, TJ Hawkinson, in his first full season with the Vikings, he came halfway through the year last season. He's going to be a big target as well. But that doesn't mean that KJ Osborne isn't going to be involved in this offense. I mean, even going back to last season, Osborne became way more of a focal point for the Vikings towards the end of the season in December and January. If you look at his last 5 regular season games, he had 5 receptions, 10 receptions, 3 receptions, 7, and then 5 catches to close out the regular season. Those would all hit the over of 2.5. And that's the name of the game. It doesn't matter if he has 4 catches for negative 15 yards. That'd be a crazy stat. That'd be like Kadarius Toney numbers. It doesn't matter how long or short those receiving yards are. As long as he's catching the ball, that is a win for anybody that takes the KJ Osborne bet with 2.5 receptions. Another reason why I like it, while yes, Todd Bowles, the head coach of the Bucs, who calls the defense as well, while he is very aggressive and you're going to see the Bucs blitzing, he also does not like letting up the big play down the field. So because of that, a lot of times you'll see the Bucs play a lot of soft zone coverage, allow everything underneath, and just make the tackle before they reach the yard marker for the first down. Because of that, I really like the idea of KJ Osborne just catching some underneath balls, maybe for 2 or 3 yards when the Bucs bring the blitz and Kirk Cousins, the Vikings quarterback, wants to get the ball out of his hands. So again, just catch the ball. Doesn't matter where on the field. And if Carlton Davis is moving with Justin Jefferson, yeah, I like that matchup for Jamel Dean. But if they move Osborne around, then you're dealing with rookie Christian Izien, who's going to be the slot corner. There could be a number of creative ways that the Vikings get the football to KJ Osborne. Now, the last pick that I have for the hires and lowers is running back Rashad White. And I absolutely love this hire of 48.5 yards. I am absolutely in love with it. It was the first one I saw, and I immediately took it. I'm about to explain that to you guys. But if you want to learn a little bit more about Underdog Fantasy and how these higher or lower work and how you can make a lot more money, as you see, I have 3 picks for 120. Underdog Fantasy is going to explain it all for you. As you see with Underdog Fantasy, the more amount of picks you make, the more money that you can win. You can go 3, 6, 9, 12, however many times that money, that's how much more you'll win. You can do the higher or lowers, as you see, like it's very specific to each position as well. Quarterbacks, you can throw in passing yards or interceptions, things like that. Receiving yards, rushing yards for the receivers and running backs as well. They also have a rivals section of Underdog Fantasy as well, where if you think Mike Evans is going to get more receiving yards than Justin Jefferson, they have a certain number of apps and numbers for that as well. So a ton of great things to use at Underdog Fantasy. Download the app. Use that promo code Pewter, Pewter, to get a bonus. But let's get back to Rashad White and why I absolutely love 48.5 rushing yards for Rashad White. For beginners, going back to Dave Canales, he's putting so much more of an emphasis on running the football. He's committing to it. It's a new zone blocking scheme. The offensive line is revamped, and Rashad White is running back one for this team. He is the starter. Dave Canales said he is a phenomenal running back. He also called him a violent runner. So this is Rashad White's running back room. Last year, we clamored for Rashad White to get the football more, or at least get more rushing attempts. And it didn't really happen until Leonard Fournette got injured. So now Rashad White is the guy. And if you want to look at last season, he averaged 3.7 yards per rushing attempt. That is not that bad considering the amount of volume that he got. If he can get at least over 12, 13, 14 rushing attempts, he's absolutely going to hit the over 48.5. But more importantly, Bucs fans and NFL fans, there were 3 games where Rashad White got at least 13 rushing attempts or more. The first one, most famously, was in the Germany game against the Seattle Seahawks, where Dave Canales saw him up close and personal. That was the best game of his career. He had the nasty stiff arm on Quandre Diggs. That's not this picture, but he had some pretty good stiff arms in the game overall that won him the scepter for angry runs. That game, he had 22 rushing attempts for 105 yards. He also had one game where he had 14 rushing attempts. That went for 64 yards, and 13 rushing attempts and another for 56. Those would all hit the over of 48.5 rushing yards that Rashad White has in his game. And that's also, if you take those 3 games, that's an average of 4.5 rushing yards per attempt. I would be shocked if Rashad White doesn't get at least 15 carries in this game. That would easily hit the over for him, the higher of 48.5 rushing yards. Plus, the Minnesota Vikings, yes, they have a new defensive coordinator, Brian Flores. Yes, they have a little bit of a different defensive line. Marcus Davenport coming over from the New Orleans Saints, so the Bucs are familiar with him. But they allowed a whopping 123 rushing yards per game last season. The Bucs were dead last in rushing, so they can only go up from here. And so having Rashad White as RB1, new zone blocking scheme, I think this is a great prop to put your money on Underdog Fantasy with Rashad White. So those are my 3 over or higher, lower picks for Underdog Fantasy. I'm going higher with all 3 of these because football is back. We want to see points. We want to see big plays. So one more time, I'm going higher than 48.5 rushing yards for Rashad White, higher than 56.5 receiving yards for Mike Evans, and higher than 2.5 catches for KJ Osborne. Let's talk a little bit about the spread and the over-under, which is 45.5 for Bucs versus Vikings. I'll start with the over-under of 45.5 because the Bucs, going back to last season, they were 12-6 when it came to the under last season. That means the under hit 12 times, the over hit 6 times in the 18 games they played last season, because they did play against the Cowboys in the playoffs as well. And to start last season, the Bucs hit the under in the first 3 games of the year. This defense, yes, there are a couple of new pieces, but this defense still has that core nucleus from last year's team, even from the Super Bowl winning team in 2020. So they kept the Bucs in a lot of games last season. I think they'll do the same this year as the offense kind of figures themselves out with Baker Mayfield and Dave Canales calling the offense for the first time in his career. When you got studs like Levante David and Carlton Davis, Antoine Winfield Jr., Vita Vea, Devin White as well, they allowed 21 points per game last season. I think they'll stick right around that for this game specifically, maybe a little bit more because of Justin Jefferson and what the Vikings can do on offense. But if they can keep the Bucs in this game with their defense, I don't think either team is scoring 30 points. So I like the under of 45.5. I think the Bucs are going to have some growing pains on offense. Both teams are really going to try to establish the run with Rashad White and Alexander Madison. For the Vikings, that's something I've talked to Vikings insiders about, how the Vikings are going to approach the season. So there's going to be long, methodical drives. Dave Canales, again, isn't as vertical. He's more horizontal, body blow after body blow, and then he'll hit the haymaker. So that's going to chew up some clock. And that's why I see the under hitting in this one. With the spread of 6.5, let's remember the Vikings were 11-0 in one-possession games last season. But if it's a one-possession game, that means it's going to be close. For everything I said about the Bucs defense keeping them in games, that bodes extremely well for the Bucs covering 6.5. I think there's too much talent on this team on both sides of the football for the Bucs to get blown out by anyone this season. There's a lot of motivation. Baker Mayfield obviously has a chip on his shoulder. He's going to be rolling out, throwing on the run, which is obviously what he does best. He's had the best talent around him ever in his career with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So this is definitely a heck of a matchup for the Bucs in week 1 to really have a litmus test of where they can be. I mean, the Vikings obviously won their division last season and still have a great roster intact. So because of the talent for the Bucs, a lot of this hinges on Baker Mayfield. There's no question about it. But this group is a talented group. And I see the Bucs covering plus 6.5. So once again, I got the under of 45.5 and the Bucs covering plus 6.5. I have a couple of anytime touchdown props as well. The first is Sean Tucker. Now, you've heard me talk a lot about Rashad White and how much of a stud he is for the Bucs running game and just for the Bucs offense. Sean Tucker is bringing a lot too. He's an undrafted free agent, but he worked his way to be RB2 on this team. He's good in short yardage situations. That preseason game against the Jets, he had a 4th and 1 and broke it loose for a plus 20-yard gain. As I said, the Bucs are going to be committing to running the football. So if they're going to do that, Rashad White can't take every single rep. Sean Tucker is going to get a couple of opportunities, and if he can get into the red zone, he's very, very fast, but he can be physical as well and kind of get those short yardage gains. I love the odds at plus 400 for Sean Tucker to score a touchdown. I mean, Brian Branch, the rookie DB from Alabama, scored in the opening night game. So, and he plays defense. Why can't Sean Tucker do it? He's going to get some opportunities. It's just a matter of where he gets those opportunities, and hopefully the Bucs can get into the red zone fairly often. The other prop bet, anytime touchdown that I really like for the Buccaneers is with Chris Godwin. His his anytime touchdown is plus 210. Chris Godwin already has chemistry with Baker Mayfield. He scored a touchdown in the lone preseason game that he played in. Granted, Mike Evans did not participate in that game, but I love the idea of Chris Godwin getting multiple targets when he is in the red zone. And again, plus 210 is a great number for one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. So that's one you should definitely put some money on. I would book it. Chris Godwin plus 210 to score a touchdown at any moment in this game. So a lot of exciting stuff to bet on for the Bucs game versus the Vikings. Hit those higher and lowers for Underdog Fantasy. But before we wrap things up, let's look around the league to a couple of the other games that I like on Sunday. We'll stick with the NFC South to start things off. I like the Falcons minus 3.5 against the Carolina Panthers. Falcons are at home. A lot of talent on that offense. They drafted Bijan Robinson. Drake London's a good receiver. Kyle Pitts, I still think there's a lot of potential. But the Panthers, they have a solid defense. They have no offense. They got Bryce Young. That's about it. Adam Thielen is older in age. I don't think they're going to put up many points at all, given that this is the debut for Young and no weapons around him. Really like the Falcons minus 3.5. The over in this game, I really like. It's Bengals versus Browns. The over is 47.5. Joe Cool is back. Joe Burrow, anytime he's under center, especially with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and the talent the Bengals have. The Browns, obviously Deshaun Watson is not a good guy, but as a quarterback, he's got a full season now after he was suspended. Nick Chubb, the running back, is great. They have some good wide receivers as well. Take the over of 47.5 and that one. This next game, Commanders at home, minus 7 against the Arizona Cardinals. I'm taking this for one reason and one reason only. The Cardinals are a really bad football team. They could very likely have the number one pick. Kyler Murray is still going to be out for a while. Not a very talented team. I have my questions about the Commanders, but I wouldn't be shocked if the Cardinals have one win this season, if they don't win any at all. So Commanders -7. I like Steelers versus 49ers. The under is 41.5. I'm taking that one. 49ers have some injuries with George Kittle, and their defense is absolutely loaded. They have kept the 49ers in multiple games when their offense has struggled at times. Their offense is still great with Shanahan calling the plays, but I could see Kenny Pickett of the Steelers struggling a little bit in this one with that 49ers defense. Meanwhile, San Francisco won't be putting up much points with Kittle out in that one. But my favorite pick of the week, this is my lock of the week, is the Miami Dolphins +3 on the road facing off against the Los Angeles Chargers. I think the Chargers are a bunch of choke artists. We've seen that before, including the playoffs last year. When healthy, the Dolphins can hang tough with anybody. Their offense is arguably the most explosive in the league. I wouldn't be surprised if the Dolphins won that game. I might take them money line, but I really like the Dolphins +3 in that one. So that's going to do it for all of my picks. One more time for the Bucs. The higher lowers, I got all hires. Rashad White, 48.5 rushing yards. Mike Evans, 56.5 receiving yards. And KJ Osborne, 2.5 receptions. And then for the over-under, I like Bucs +6.5, the under 45.5, and anytime touchdowns for Sean Tucker and Chris Godwin. That's going to do it for me on today's show. We're going to have this show every single week with me making my picks. You can follow all of my work on PewterReport.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Matty__Matera. That's Matera. Follow us on all of our social media at Pewter Report on Instagram, Threads, Facebook, and Twitter, and our YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe. It's Pewter Report TV, where we have tons of content coming out. That's going to do it for us on today's show. I'm Matt Matera from PewterReport.com. Hope you guys win all of your bets this week.